In a 2022 interview, while explaining the lyrics to one of his most successful tracks named Romantic Homicide, D4vd described the song as follows: "It's kind of like the storytelling aspect of the lyrics that came before it, in a way that it builds up to the big moment, where she died in the back of my mind. I didn't kill her physically in the back of my mind. She died and I didn't even cry, not a single tear." Reflecting on this now, the description eerily mirrors elements of the recent events involving the artist. Even more striking is that the music video for the song premiered on September 7, 2022, which aligns exactly with the birthday of the victim, Celeste Rivas Hernandez, raising questions about whether he outlined a premeditated scenario in his work and has since brought it to fruition. The central focus of the public analysis regarding the D4vd case revolves around the unsettling digital footprint, particularly his music and social media activity. Netizens heavily scrutinized the album Withered, which David confirmed was "my story from my experiences." A key piece of circumstantial evidence is the invisible string theory, interlude, where David allegedly used Celeste Rivas Hernandez's voice pitched down to sound older. In the recording, the girl chillingly says, "I loved you before I existed and I love you even when I die."
Have you ever heard of the invisible string theory?
Okay.
And we're connected because we're supposed to be connected. It's kind of like that, I loved you before I existed and I love you even when I die.
His refusal to disclose the voice's identity, citing a questionable copyright issue, was deemed suspicious. Furthermore, David's extensive TikTok reposts serve as a gold mine for theories about motive, revealing extreme jealousy and possessiveness. Songs like Ghost also contain alarming lyrics, such as Why Can't I Hear Your Heartbeat?", which fans interpret as further grim foreshadowing. The case of Celeste Rivas Hernandez and the singer David has become a source of intense online debate, often referencing Occam's razor, known as Adam's razor, or the law of simplicity. Occam's razor posits that if there are two competing hypotheses that equally explain the observed data, the one with the fewer assumptions should be selected. However, applying this principle to the D4vd case is challenging because, as one source notes, the entire case is currently a giant ball of assumptions. It is difficult to shave away all the different assumptions when almost every central fact remains technically unconfirmed. For instance, authorities have yet to formally confirm an intimate relationship between David and Celeste, despite numerous allegations, screenshots, and videos. Even the existence of an other Celeste, the second Celeste, or decoy Celeste, an adult woman, is a theory used to explain David's actions. The official handling of the investigation adds layers of contradiction. Lack of homicide confirmation. The LAPD and the medical examiner's office have been so quiet about this entire situation. They are not formally calling it a homicide investigation but rather a death investigation. Authorities stated that it could take weeks or months to even determine if a crime had been committed. The trunk paradox. This stance is questioned by the public, as it is argued that nobody goes into a trunk by themselves. The body was discovered in David's impounded car, which had been parked for at least 3 weeks. Mangled reports. The nature of the body when found is disputed, with some reports initially stating it was just a head and a torso, while other outlets use the word dismembered or in pieces, with no consensus. As of the filming of the source material mid to late September 2025, David's legal status remained unchanged, which fuels both the guilty and innocent theories. Not yet charged. David has not been named a suspect, has not been detained, and has not been arrested. Initial cooperation. David's spokesperson released a short statement confirming that David was informed and is cooperating with the police. Abrupt changes in conduct. Despite the initial statement of cooperation and continuing his tour immediately after the car was impounded, he performed a show on September 9. David soon stopped his world tour and made no further public statements. Communications shifted entirely from his spokesperson to his attorney. The house raid and move. 2 days after Celeste was identified as of 2025, David's Hollywood Hills rental home, rented by his manager for $20,000 a month, was searched by authorities. They were seen leaving with evidence bags and electronics. Following the raid, David moved out of the Hollywood Hills house. A law enforcement perspective. Despite the lack of an arrest, one law enforcement expert stated with 1,000% confidence that David is suspect number 1. Given the authority's silence, the public focus has shifted almost entirely to David's extensive digital footprint, which is seen as the key to discovering the truth. Music as confession. David's own statements that his album Withered 2025 is my very first album. It's me, all these experiences, it's all about love, bro. It's super authentic and super raw and super me this time. Encourage the interpretation of his lyrics and sound bites as autobiographical admissions. The interlude as proof. The invisible string theory. Interlude is central to this digital analysis, where David is accused of using Celeste's pitch down voice uttering the prophetic phrase, I love you even when I die. David's subsequent claim that he cannot disclose who the voice is because of copyright is viewed with extreme suspicion, as this is deemed a weak excuse to hide a real person. Social media motive. David's vast collection of TikTok reposts is described as a gold mine for the theory that he was driven by extreme jealousy and possessiveness. These reports advocate for controlling one's girlfriend, e.g., wanting a girl who doesn't interact with a single person on the face of this earth, and even feature dark, violent scenarios. The extensive nature of David's online activities means that analyzing his digital life has become the primary method for netizens to formulate theories, compensating for the lack of official information from the police. A predominant theory among online analysts is that the girl's voice interlude was intentionally pitched down to make her sound older. This suggested manipulation serves as the foundation for the claim that David was actively attempting to conceal the speaker's true age and identity, likely because she was a minor. The dialogue itself, however, contains emotional and linguistic cues that reinforce the belief that the speaker was quite young. The conversation begins with a vulnerable, almost pleading question from the girl. Why don't you hold my hand anymore? The subject matter quickly turns to the philosophical concept of destiny. Have you ever heard of the invisible strength theory? The context suggests the conversation may have been heavily edited, as the source notes a jarring juxtaposition with a sudden mention of controversial of raping kids. Though the girl quickly steers back to the romantic premise. So basically we met because we were supposed to meet and we're connected because we're supposed to be connected. Analysts argue that the style and word choice used by the girl when explaining the theory reveal her age, regardless of any pitch alteration. The belief is that the explanation provided is a very romanticized version of the invisible string theory. Commenters suggest that the presentation and intensity of feeling conveyed in her words sound like those of a much younger person. Falling in love. This interpretation suggests the conversation was recorded during a period when the speaker believed to be Celeste, who was 14 at the time of her death, was deeply invested in a profound, destined love narrative, typical of an adolescent perspective. This perceived mismatch between the pitch of the voice and the youthful, romantic intensity of the dialogue solidifies the public's conviction that David knowingly manipulated the audio to obscure his relationship with a minor. Analysts argue that the style and word choice used by the girl when explaining the theory reveal her age, regardless of any pitch alteration. The belief is that the explanation provided is a very romanticized version of the invisible string theory. Commenters suggest that the presentation and intensity of feeling conveyed in her words sound like those of a much younger person. Falling in love. This interpretation suggests the conversation was recorded during a period when the speaker believed to be Celeste, who was 14 at the time of her death, was deeply invested in a profound, destined love narrative, typical of an adolescent perspective. This perceived mismatch between the pitch of the voice and the youthful romantic intensity of the dialogue solidifies the public's conviction that David knowingly manipulated the audio to obscure his relationship with a minor. The most unsettling aspect of the interlude is the girl's declaration of undying devotion. She concludes her explanation of the theory with the statement, I loved you before I existed and I love you even when I die. Heard after Celeste's body was discovered in David's car. This line is widely viewed as chillingly prophetic. It transforms the interlude from a mere artistic soundbite into a potential final testament. The public fixates on the idea that David included this line as statement explicitly referencing death in his album, which he described as an unauthentic story, months before Celeste's body was found. When the girl repeats the phrase, I love you, David notably remains silent. This silence, coupled with the line's dark content, is interpreted by many not as artistic choice, but as David's acknowledgement of the grim reality that would follow their relationship, thereby adding a layer of implied guilt and premeditation to the digital evidence. David's initial explanation for including the conversation was a decisive, yet emotionally detached, confirmation that the speaker was no longer present. When discussing the girl who twice declares, I love you, in the interlude, David stated that person that was saying, I love you, she's not in my life anymore. This admission was treated by the public as confirmation of a very real, and now concluded, relationship, lending credence to the theory that the conversation was a genuine artifact of his personal life, not merely a sound actor's recording. The casual finality with which David delivered this statement, that the person who spoke of loving him, even when I die, was simply not in my life anymore, only intensified suspicion, especially since this admission came before the extent of Celeste's death was fully known. David explicitly used the severed connection to establish the thematic foundation of the Withered project. He explained that the irony of the situation, that the person who believed in the unbreakable, invisible string theory was now gone, proved his assertion that the connection can sometimes be cut, even though people generally believe it cannot be severed. This realization of a broken connection justified the album's overall morbid tone. The title Withered itself signifies the decay and the withering away and the ending of the life cycle of this rose. David intended the album to be a continuation and almost a goodbye to David in a way, and a closing of a chapter. The interlude was crucial for solidifying that message of this is the end of something, not the beginning. This thematic need for closure is further reflected in the inclusion of tracks that feel like endings and conclusions and goodbyes, such as Afterlife and Ghost, with the final track, Afterlife, serving as the final blow, or the big moment of the carrying of the casket. David also confirmed that his deliberate silence when the girl says, I love you, was an artistic setup, immediately preceding the next track. Is this really love? Beyond thematic justification, David framed the interlude as a necessary tool for listener immersion, stating that he wanted the listener to feel like they were reading a book almost. The purpose was to provide a visual landscape and listener to kind of be in my head, in my mindset, so that listeners could gain insight into what I was thinking when I was writing these songs. By placing this unedited or yet possibly pitched down piece of a real-life conversation into the album, David claimed he was granting the audience an extra layer of authenticity and storytelling. However, the use of such highly intimate and tragic subject matter, combined with the subsequent bizarre evasion regarding her identity, led many to conclude that the artistic transparency was simply a veil for a much darker reality. The analysis of the interlude, invisible string theory, becomes deeply problematic when examining David's defense regarding the identity of the girl's voice. While David claimed the interlude was a real conversation used to lend an extra layer of authenticity and storytelling to the project, his subsequent refusal to name the speaker introduced a layer of highly scrutinized suspicion regarding concealment. When pressed in an interview to reveal the identity of the person who speaks the chilling lines about destiny and death, David offered an explanation that analysts immediately found very strange and legally confounding. David stated clearly, I cannot disclose who the voice is because of copyright. This defense, claiming that intellectual property law prevented him from speaking the name of the individual, was not only viewed as insufficient, but highly indicative of intentional evasion. The sources described David's excuse as a weird thing to say and a weird excuse. This response contradicted the expected behavior of a public figure trying to clear their name or, at the very least, offer a simple, non-incriminating explanation for a personal soundbite on a commercial track. The assertion that copyright necessitates anonymity is logically and legally unsound, leading analysts to dismiss it as a cover story. Copyright law governs the use of the sound or recording itself in a commercial work, not the public disclosure of the person's name. If David had secured the rights to use the voice, which he claimed to have done, referencing sound bites, he should technically be free to name the source. Logically, if the identity were truly a legal secret due to copyright concerns, the individual whose voice was used would still be able to hear their voice on the song once it was commercially released. That person could still hear it and demand compensation or get you for copyright, regardless of whether David publicly disclosed their name. The fact that David defaulted to such a complicated, technical defense highlighted the perceived implausibility of the truth. He could have simply stated the speaker was an ex of mine or a fling of mine, or this relationship I had that was rough. The failure to use a simple, vague, yet believable explanation suggested the reality was too incriminating to be dismissed with common PR language. The consensus among netizens and analysts is that the copyright excuse was a deliberate, yet poorly conceived, effort to hide the girl's true identity. The evasion itself became more damaging than the truth it sought to hide. The theory that the voice was pitched down to make her sound older directly links David's manipulation of the audio to his subsequent legal evasion. If the speaker was Celeste, who was 14 years old, the disclosure of her name would expose David not merely to claims of a failed adult relationship, but to severe statutory allegations, such as those related to statutory charges or grooming. The bizarre excuse suggests that the identity itself is the sensitive detail, not just the recording rights. David was desperate to maintain the mystery because the moment the girl was identified as Celeste Rivas Hernandez, The context of the entire album, and specifically the prophetic line, "I love you even when I die," would confirm his connection to a missing minor whose body was found in his vehicle. This systematic evasion is widely interpreted as a clear attempt to protect himself from the severe legal and public consequences of his alleged actions. The album Withered 2025 is a major musical undertaking by David, reaching number 13 on the Billboard 200 album charts and already garnering 500 million streams on Spotify shortly after its release. David explicitly stated that this is his first, fully fleshed out, project, differentiating it from his previous EPs. David describes Withered as a project that is super authentic and super raw, encapsulating his entire life. He confirmed that, "It's all me and represents my story from my experiences over the past 2 years, covering his relationships and personal hardships." This is the first time David has openly claimed that the songs are based on his personal life and experiences. He encourages listeners to consume the tracks in order, comparing the experience to reading a book, where each track serves as a distinct chapter. He aimed for listeners to feel like they are getting a visual landscape and an interlude that provides insight into his mindset while writing the project. David views the album not as a debut but as a continuation, and in some sense, almost a goodbye to David in a way. He further characterizes Withered as the closing of a chapter. The central theme and core visual identity of Withered revolves around roses and this string, the red string. David uses the imagery of a rose to represent himself, beautiful, but possessing thorns that can wound others. The process of Withered signifies the decay and the withering away and the ending of the life cycle of this rose. The album conveys a message of finality rather than inception. David notes that while the project carries a resurrection type of thing, ultimately, by the end of the project it's done. The final track, Afterlife, is referred to as the final blow and symbolizes the carrying of the casket kind of thing. During a live performance in Houston, David was seen breaking down sobbing on stage while singing Afterlife. Houston holds significance as the location where his music career began, although his hometown is Queens, New York. Initially, fans speculated that his emotional display was an "I made it" moment, linked to his success in Houston. However, the performance was described by onlookers as little weird. Many online observers suggested that his emotional collapse was due to a complex mixture of factors, including the song itself, the location, and recent circumstances. This public breakdown was widely understood as distress over what happened. In promoting the album, David posted an Instagram picture, which later went viral, of himself taking a selfie with white shirts covered in blood and red paint displayed on a black tarp. The caption advertised a limited edition Withered cover vinyl along with custom bloody shirts made by me. This bloody shirt merch was subsequently pulled from his website. The song Ghost is one of the final tracks on David's Withered album, alongside Afterlife. Netizens have intensively analyzed the lyrics of Ghost, interpreting the song as a detailed account of David allegedly committing murder and subsequently living in a state of delusion. The notable lyrics of Ghost provide strong circumstantial support for the narrative of a crime of passion and subsequent denial, as interpreted by online commentators. "Why can't I hear your heartbeat?" This phrase is central to the netizen theory that David killed the victim. The inability to hear a heartbeat is immediately suggestive of death. This alarming question is followed by lines emphasizing a retreat into fantasy. "Just a dream, just a dream, just a dream, don't wake me up." Netizens interpret this section as the artist facing the reality of the victim's death, but rejecting it by framing the experience as a make-believe fantasy. By repeating the request, "Leave me in this dream, don't be nasty. Let us keep this perfect memory," the narrator seems to be pleading for the delusion to continue, thus preserving a perfect memory of the girl who is now physically absent. Other lines further support the death narrative, such as, "Eyes looking right through me. We'll both know what I have to do. He might have you but I've got your ghost." The phrase, "he might have you but I've got your ghost," implies a deep, possessive jealousy. This line suggests the narrator believes that even if another individual, has the victim, whether in life or in a rival relationship, potentially referencing the suspected individual named Gus, the narrator possesses the victim's true essence, her ghost. This twisted possessiveness is reinforced by the following lines. "And we both know that's the real you and God knows it's true, I love you the most." Netizens believe this language indicates that the narrator felt justified in his actions because he considered his connection to the victim even in death to be the real relationship. Netizens universally agree that the entirety of Ghost sounds like David describing the act of allegedly killing the victim. This interpretation aligns with David's previous promotional content and lyrical themes related to intense jealousy, control, and possessiveness found across his digital footprint and other Withered tracks. The lyrical content moves beyond typical heartbreak, focusing on the literal cessation of life and the subsequent desire to maintain the relationship through a ghostly fantasy. Dance with me under the moon above, she's so happy when she's with me. He placement of Ghost as the penultimate song, followed by Afterlife, contributes to the overall ending theme of the Withered album, which David described as the closing of a chapter, and the decay and the withering away and the ending of the life cycle of this rose. The track, Afterlife, itself is referred to as the final blow and symbolizes the carrying of the casket kind of thing. Therefore, Ghost is viewed as the moment of death within the album's story arc. The song, Afterlife, is the concluding track on David's Withered album, which the artist has characterized as encompassing his entire story and serving as the definitive closing of a chapter. David explicitly labeled Afterlife as the final blow of the project. David provided a macabre, yet defining, visual for the song, stating that Afterlife represents kind of that big moment of the carrying of the casket kind of thing. This imagery solidifies the theme of finality that permeates the album, tying into the concept of the decay and the withering away and the ending of the life cycle of this rose. While discussing the entire 14-track project, David noted that there is a resurrection type of thing. But Afterlife confirms that, by the end of the project, it's done. He intended for listeners to feel as if they were reading a book, with the final track acting as the ultimate conclusion to his story. David also mentioned that he added a layer of depth to the album by including songs and interludes that feel like endings and goodbyes, solidifying the message that the project is the end of something, not the beginning. The concept of the afterlife itself is a recurring motif in Withered, as David addresses the subject in other tracks, claiming, "You don't believe in the afterlife, but babe, just know I've seen it." The lyrics of Afterlife suggest themes of disillusionment, betrayal, and enduring, even possessive, devotion. The phrase, "My mother told me he would lie," reveals a previous warning against deceit. This line stands in contrast to another lyric in the song, "The devil told me you were good for May," indicating that the narrator disregarded sound advice in favor of a destructive influence or relationship. The line, "When I die I'll love you from the afterlife," points to the depth of the narrator's attachment, suggesting a love that is intended to persist beyond physical boundaries. Other notable lyrics from Afterlife reinforce a sense of profound loss and heartbreak. "Something's missing from inside of me. Someone stole what wasn't mine. I thought a girl would make me happy. Real love is not for sale." The gravity of the song was underscored by David's highly emotional live rendition during a performance in Houston. He was seen breaking down sobbing on stage while performing Afterlife. Although some fans initially interpreted this as an "I made it" moment, because David's music career originated in Houston where he moved at age 13, online observers found the display a little weird. The consensus among many was that his highly public emotional collapse was a reflection of distress over what happened, suggesting the intense sorrow was linked to the underlying events of the album's narrative. The track, "You Left Me First," is featured on David's Withered album, which he confirms is his first, fully fleshed out project and is super authentic and super raw, detailing his experiences over the past 2 years, including his relationships and personal hardships. The song's core theme revolves around the narrator's overwhelming jealousy and sense of betrayal. The notable lyric, "Falling deeper into jealousy 'cause I can't help the thought of you with someone else," directly articulates the emotional state driving the track. This line indicates that the narrator is intensely preoccupied with the victim's relationship with another person, viewing it as a personal affront. The song expresses the narrator's resentment over being rejected, despite his professed devotion. "You left me at my best, I loved you at your worst. How ironic is that when you left me first it never makes sense to me." This suggests the narrator felt entitled to the relationship based on his self-perceived efforts, making the betrayal intolerable. The track concludes with the potent declaration, "I know the truth," implying the narrator's knowledge of the perceived betrayal is the definitive trigger for his emotional crisis. Netizens strongly speculate that the intense jealousy described in "You Left Me First" is directly aimed at a figure identified as Gus. This hypothesis is based on alleged, unconfirmed text messages between Celeste and a friend. In these purported messages, Celeste discussed intimate relations with a guy named Gus. She allegedly claimed the encounter was non-consensual, stating she was just drunk and went through with it because got mad at me for refusing initial advances. The critical moment that netizens believe fueled David's obsessive jealousy occurred immediately after Celeste allegedly sent these messages. She quickly sent a follow-up text to her friend stating, "Do not text back." He came back. He's crying, do not text me. This reaction strongly suggested that David discovered the text messages detailing the incident with Gus. Netizens interpret David's subsequent collapse crying and then allegedly being fixed by Celeste. I fixed him as the catalyst for a highly controlling dynamic. According to this theory, David forgave Celeste for the presumed betrayal, an act deemed insane, given her status as a child and a victim. This incident is believed to have cemented David's possessiveness, directly motivating the lyrics about not being able to tolerate the thought of you with someone else. Furthermore, David later reposted a TikTok stating, "Every guy's personal hell is watching his girlfriend defend another man to him," which netizens widely connected to the drama involving Gus. The song ends with a voice note, which netizen analysis suggests is Celeste's voice, pitched down, apologizing. "I sound so stupid right now, I've been so selfish and I can't stop thinking about you and what I did and how it's affecting like every just wanted to say I'm sorry, I really am sorry." This apology, often interpreted as being related to the Gus incident, effectively serves as the narrator's confirmation of the betrayal that drove his extreme jealousy. The song, Where Did It Go Wrong?, was released by David in December 2024, towards the end of the timeline detailing the alleged events surrounding him and Celeste. This track, alongside others on the Withered album, is considered by David to be his personal story drawn from his own relationships and hardships over the past 2 years, making it super authentic and super raw. The lyrics of Where Did It Go Wrong are highly scrutinized for their disturbing implications of extreme control and narcissistic behavior. The most alarming line is the declaration, "I don't mean to be conceited, but I'm the reason you're still breathing." This statement, which the narrator prefaces by denying conceit, strongly suggests a belief that the victim's existence is entirely dependent on him. This shifts the dynamic of the relationship from love, or even intense jealousy, to one of total dominance and power over the victim's life and death. Netizens interpret this as a chilling manifestation of David's alleged possessive and manipulative nature, suggesting he saw himself as the ultimate authority in Celeste's life. Other lyrics in the song further underscore this breakdown of the relationship and the narrator's self-pity and entitlement. Where did it go wrong with you? I don't belong with you. It's a tragedy, I really thought you were meant for me. How could you lie to me? Every kiss put a cavity between my lips. I don't really want your love no more, I swear, 'cause I don't need it. These lines portray the relationship as a failed tragedy, where the narrator feels wronged and lied to, believing the connection was meant for me. The reference to a lie and the pain-felt cavity between my lips highlights his focus on his own suffering due to perceived betrayal. The themes in Where Did It Go Wrong reinforce netizen theories suggesting David was grooming Celeste. One netizen commentary specifically suggests that David wanted to manipulate her and make her believe that no matter what they were meant to be. The line, "I'm the reason you're still breathing," could be interpreted as a psychological tool of control, making a young, vulnerable girl feel indebted to her alleged abuser for her safety and well-being. The song's release date in December 2024 aligns with the period when Celeste was reportedly running away multiple times and David was posting extensively about his relationship struggles and emotional turmoil on platforms like TikTok. Near the end of the song, listeners hear a faint girl's voice saying, "You're special, David," which is reminiscent of the inserted voice messages found throughout the album. This inclusion of the voice is intended by David to add a layer of authenticity and storytelling to the project. However, in the context of the extreme control expressed in the lyrics, this perceived validation from the victim makes the track all the more unsettling to listeners. The prevailing netizen theory argues that David's sick jealousy and his alleged fear that Celeste might realize she was being groomed and was ready to tell someone could have been the motive for homicide. The claim of being the reason you're still breathing is seen as the final, disturbing element in the portrait of a relationship defined by possessiveness and danger. The song, Somewhere in the Middle, is a track from David's Withered album, which he affirmed is his first, fully fleshed out project. David described the album as super authentic and super raw, drawing from his own relationships and hardships over the past 2 years. The lyric in question, "I just bought a hammer, I'm trying to fix you," is particularly disturbing and contributes significantly to the netizen theory that David's music describes violence and extreme control within his alleged relationship. This line suggests that the narrator views the subject, allegedly Celeste, as flawed or broken, requiring violent intervention symbolized by the hammer to be fixed or brought back into alignment with the narrator's desires. This imagery of using a tool for brute force to correct a person is highly suggestive of extreme control and potential violence. The narrator attempts to temper this shocking statement with an acknowledgement of his own instability. "But where are my manners? I might have a screw loose." However, instead of softening the blow, This phrase reinforces the idea that the narrator is mentally unhinged and justifies his potentially violent intentions by admitting to being, losing it a little, and, somewhere in the middle, emotionally. The surrounding lyrics in Somewhere in the Middle focus heavily on suspicion, perceived betrayal, and the narrator's emotional return on investment in the relationship. It's you doing things you're not supposed to do. You don't think that I would know the truth. But every day I see the way you move and it's not like you. I gave you what you wanted and I got nothing in return. These lines detail a relationship where the narrator suspects deceit and is focused on monitoring the other person's behavior, leading to anger that culminates in the violent hammer metaphor. The narrator struggles to reconcile his feelings, stating, "I don't love you, I don't hate you, I'm somewhere in the middle." Netizens interpret "somewhere in the middle" as a clear reflection of the manipulative dynamics present in the alleged relationship. The lyric, "I just bought a hammer, I'm trying to fix you," is seen as the ultimate expression of the narrator's madness and his attempt to control a young girl. One online comment directly addresses the disturbing nature of the track, noting the sadness of the narrator feeling this way about a young girl who was trying to escape his madness. He wanted to manipulate her and make her believe that no matter what they were meant to be. The song's focus on correcting the victim through forceful means supports the theory that David was exhibiting possessive and controlling behavior, escalating to themes of violence, as the victim was trying to escape his influence. The analysis of David's social media activity, specifically his extensive collection of TikTok reposts, reveals a pervasive theme of extreme possessiveness, isolation, and jealousy, which netizens interpret as evidence supporting the theory that David murdered the victim in a crime of passion. The reposted statement, "Need a girl who doesn't interact with a single person on the face of this earth," is highly scrutinized as it expresses an unambiguous desire for the partner's complete isolation. This phrase suggests that the narrator requires a partner who is entirely dependent on him and is free from any external influences or relationships. This level of demanded isolation is seen as a key component of the alleged grooming and control exerted over Celeste. This specific repost is contextualized by numerous other pieces of digital content that collectively illustrate a pattern of pathological possessiveness. David's reposts frequently display themes of jealousy directed at rivals and fantasizing about retribution. Examples include a repost expressing the wish that whoever flirts with his partner gets hit by multiple cars, and another where he imagines running over every guy who's ever looked at her. He also reposted the phrase, "We're never breaking up, bitch. It's either me or nobody else in this world, bitch. I love you to death." David reposted list of behaviors considered micro-cheating, including secretive communication, turning to someone else when the relationship is rocky, or even seeking friendships with someone the partner finds attractive. This list suggests an expectation of hyper-vigilance and absolute loyalty, with all external contact being viewed as a threat. Reposts reveal the narrator's preoccupation with the partner's communication habits, such as monitoring her replies for brevity or becoming upset when she misses a text. One repost questions, "Imagine talking to other men when you have me, are you insane?" Netizens generally agree that David's TikTok reposts constitute a gold mine that clearly signals a person struggling with sick jealousy and an inability to handle rejection. The highly specific and voluminous nature of these posts contributes to the theory that David was exhibiting the possessive behavior that culminated in homicide. David's extensive social media activity, particularly his reposted TikTok content, forms a crucial part of the circumstantial evidence analyzed by netizens, who contend that these posts display a pattern of sick jealousy and possessive behavior that foreshadowed violence. David himself has described his album Withered as super authentic and super raw, drawing from his own relationships and hardships, suggesting his digital footprint reflects his internal state. Netizens often refer to his TikTok reposts as a gold mine for the crime of passion theory, given the alarming nature of the content. The reposts consistently express extreme possessiveness and the desire to inflict harm upon rivals. A widely discussed repost employs graphic imagery to convey aggressive jealousy. It features a video of a guy chopping chicken, described as mincing chicken meat, accompanied by the caption, "Me if I see her talk with other dudes." This post is interpreted as the narrator translating his competitive jealousy into a visceral, violent fantasy directed at any perceived threat to his relationship. This theme of physical elimination is consistent across several reposts involving vehicular violence. One repost detailed the narrator's fantasy, "Me after running over every guy who's ever looked at her." Another reposted statement reads, "Not saying I'm jealous or anything, but I hope whoever flirts with you other than me gets hit by multiple cars." These messages go far beyond typical emotional distress, depicting clear homicidal fantasies aimed at ensuring the partner's absolute exclusivity. The use of weaponry in the reposts introduces a terrifying element of lethal intent. One specific repost contains the phrase, "Pass me the Draco." The source confirms that Draco is slang for a pistol-style AK-47. This inclusion of high-powered firearm slang suggests the contemplation of extreme measures, moving the rhetoric from self-pity to preparedness for serious violence. These violent reposts exist within a larger collection of content advocating for total ownership and isolation of the partner. David frequently reposted phrases that demanded the partner's complete isolation, such as the need for a girl who doesn't interact with a single person on the face of this earth. The overall narrative fostered through these reposts is one of absolute control, where any external interaction, including flirting or even simply talking, is met with murderous fantasy. Ultimately, these combined reposts, including the graphic image of mincing meat, the threat of running over rivals, and the call for a Draco, are viewed by netizens as David broadcasting his predictably awful pattern of behavior, characterized by deep jealousy and extreme possessiveness. They suggest this digital footprint serves as a clear warning sign of a person consumed by an inability to cope with rejection. David's public collection of reposted content on social media, which David himself has indicated draws from his own relationships, and is super authentic and super raw, contains highly scrutological manipulation and self-justification. The specific repost concerning control is an alarming piece of rhetorical self-defense that asks, was I too controlling, or did I just want to be respected? Was I too controlling? Or did I just ask for reassurance? Was I too controlling? Or did I just care about you? Was I too controlling? Or was I just concerned for your safety? Was I too controlling? Or is it because I love you too hard? Was I controlling? Or were you just out late drunk? Was I controlling? Or I didn't want to get cheated on. The repost concludes with the summary statement again, just because I care about you doesn't make me controlling. Analysis of self-justification and manipulation. This extensive question and answer structure attempts to reframe coercive and pose legitimate concern or justified requests within a relationship. The strategy employed is a manipulative defense mechanism, by posing controlling actions such as demanding reassurance or monitoring the partner's safety as acts of caring or love. The narrator aims to deny responsibility for the controlling behavior. Netizens interpret this repost as a clear sign of David's alleged sick jealousy and possessiveness, behaviors which many believe led to the victim's tragic fate. The repost suggests the narrator felt justified because he believed the partner was out late drunk, or that he didn't want to get cheated on, thereby shifting the blame for the control onto the partner's alleged actions. This post is part of David's massive digital footprint, often referred to as a gold mine for theories of a crime of passion, given the overwhelming presence of content displaying possessive and emotionally tumultuous themes. The volume and specificity of these reposts suggest a person, chronically online, who highly prioritizes his own emotional turmoil, while perhaps intended by David to be edgy and fun, or too shit post, in alignment with his brand, is seen by the online community as a dark, public confession of a person, predictably awful, who was unable to cope with the perceived loss of control over his partner. Bloody shirt merch was a controversial element of David's promotional campaign for his album, Withered. David affirmed that Withered was his first fully fleshed out project, and was super authentic and super raw, drawing from his personal experiences and hardships. The limited edition merchandise was publicized through an Instagram picture that went viral. The photo featured David taking a selfie with a bunch of white shirts covered in blood and red paint, displayed on a black tarp. The accompanying caption advertised a limited edition Withered cover vinyl out now plus custom bloody shirts made by me. The shirts were available for sale at $35. This imagery aligned with the overall theme of Withered, which David defined as focusing on the decay and the withering away and the ending of the life cycle of this rose, signifying the end of an era. The graphic use of blood and red paint served to underscore the album's dark and raw nature. The bloody shirt merch has since been pulled from his website. Netizens and commentators noted that this removal makes sense, given the extremely disturbing context surrounding David at the time, following the discovery of a deceased female body in the trunk of his impounded Tesla. The dark promotional material was viewed retrospectively as horrifyingly relevant to the unfolding case. One former fan expressed the trauma of linking the concert's red-themed aesthetic and the merchandise to the real-life tragedy, stating, "I literally showed up to his concert in my own red paint shirt, meanwhile he had someone dead in his trunk, and he just feels a guilty conscience about it now, and everything about it just feels really ick." The highly public and violent nature of the merchandise promotion, coupled with the actual discovery of a body shortly after the album's release, created a disturbing connection between David's artistic expression of violence and the reality of the alleged crime. The discovery of a giant indent on the back of David's Tesla is a key piece of circumstantial evidence that forms the basis of one of the competing hypotheses regarding the victim's death. The Tesla, which bore Texas license plates, was impounded in Hollywood Hills after neighbors reported it being parked unattended on a residential street for at least 3 weeks. A neighbor confirmed to the media that the car has a giant dent on the back, noting that David never fixed it. When the neighbor inquired about the damage, David didn't really want to say what happened. This physical damage led to the second accidental theory put forth by netizens. This hypothesis suggests that the victim, Celeste Rivas Hernandez, may have been accidentally ran Celeste over and she passed away. Under this theory, the dent is viewed as evidence of a fatal collision. It is speculated that David, or potentially someone on his team, panicked upon realizing a minor was accidentally killed. They would have chosen not to call the police out of fear of legal repercussions, especially since David was at the height of his career, thus opting to conceal the body instead. The fact that David left the car unattended with the body inside while continuing his tour suggests a frantic effort to dispose of the problem rather than seeking professional help. The fact that Celeste Rivas Hernandez frequently obscured her face in photographs, particularly those allegedly taken with David, has been a central point of analysis for netizens investigating the dynamics of their rumored relationship. Evidence suggests that Celeste rarely appeared in public media with her face fully visible. Netizens believe this was a deliberate effort to conceal her identity, potentially due to her age or the clandestine nature of the relationship. A screenshot from a Discord chat, allegedly from March 2023 when Celeste was first tweeted, showed David during a live stream. Behind him, a girl believed to be Celeste was sitting and covering most of her face with a blanket or what appears to be like a jacket. In another widely circulated selfie taken by David, a girl next to him, thought to be Celeste, had her face entirely covered almost by a Louis Vuitton purse. In this image, only her eyebrows and curly hair were visible, leading people to believe it was Celeste because she has to cover her face and she has curly hair. A video from a June 2024 concert allegedly showed Celeste backstage with David's younger brother. She was seen with a hood covering over her face and appeared timid when she looked back after someone called her brother's name. The frequent concealment of Celeste's face is viewed by the online community as a sign of manipulation and forced isolation. One commentator noted the sadness in the situation, stating that Celeste only seemed to exist in David's world, and that, even in his world, she would have to hide and play small. This suggests David severely isolated her from external relationships and forced her to hide her presence. The practice of covering her face became a significant identifier used by netizens to distinguish the victim Celeste from the rumored older Celeste, or decoy Celeste, who was allegedly an adult woman with a similar name and appearance whom David could use to deflect accusations of dating a minor. Netizens theorized that the older Celeste, she never really hides her face, leading people to assume that any girl with David covering her face was the victim Celeste. The continuous difficulty in obtaining clear pictures of Celeste's face is cited as a reason why it remains so hard to get a good look at her face, making it difficult for investigators and the public to definitively confirm her identity in subsequent alleged sightings. David's announced 5-year plan has become a significant source of speculation among netizens, primarily due to its alignment with the timeline of his alleged relationship. In an archived interview, when asked where he saw himself in 5 years, David outlined a distinct schedule: achieving massive musical success for 3 years, retiring in the 4th year, and completely disappearing by the 5th year. The 5th year, this plan coincided with the time when Celeste would have reached the age of 18. David's vision for his post-career life was definitive. He would be off the grid, living on an island with a luxurious home, and maintaining no social media, no digital footprint. He would simply be just gone. This timeline is linked to other critical allegations concerning his intentions with Celeste. Celeste's brother allegedly told someone that David continually keeps promising to marry her when she turns 18. An Instagram account suspected to be Celeste's circulated a picture showing a diamond ring on the left ring finger. Netizens theorized that David's plan to retire and achieve a no digital footprint status in 5 years was part of the promise that he allegedly made her regarding their future. This correlation between the marriage promise at 18, the alleged ring, and David's planned isolation suggests a deeply possessive relationship where he intended to remove himself and Celeste from public and digital scrutiny once she was legally an adult. David's Instagram post, made just days before the discovery of Celeste Rivas Hernandez's body in his impounded Tesla, has been widely cited by netizens due to its extremely unsettling content and ironic caption. The post was shared on September 5, 2025, 3 days before the body was discovered on September 8. The image featured in the Instagram post was an animated picture of a cat with its scalp removed, revealing a glowing brain. Needles were depicted being injected into the brain, and pills labeled fluoride and Wi-Fi were visible nearby. This combination of imagery suggests mental distress, manipulation, and violence. The timing of the post, so close to the identification of a deceased body connected to David, made the content highly disturbing in retrospect. David captioned the post with a sarcastic remark, "I start media training tomorrow, guys, wish me luck." Netizens found this post deeply ironic. The implication of the caption that David was preparing to manage his public image was juxtaposed against the graphic image that seemed to expose internal chaos and violence. Commentators questioned the timing of the media training, noting that it was crazy that he would be starting such preparation just as the situation was about to explode. Typically, a major artist would undergo media training prior to a world tour or a large press release schedule, not immediately before authorities discovered a body linked to him. In the context of the ensuing tragedy, the post is interpreted as David either unconsciously broadcasting his mental state, which aligns with the raw themes of his Withered album, or sarcastically acknowledging his own need for damage control, as he anticipated a public relations nightmare. The collection of song lyrics and spoken word interludes on David's Withered album constitutes a central component of the Confession. Evidence analyzed by netizens, establishing a clear pattern of possessiveness, implied violence, and a tragic finality. David himself confirmed that Withered is his very first album. That is, super authentic and super raw, detailing my story from the past 2 years. The invisible string theory. Interlude is a non-song track featuring a conversation with added echo, used to add an extra layer of authenticity and storytelling to the project. Netizens believe the female voice is Celeste's, pitched down. The interlude romanticizes a doomed connection through the girl's inquiry about the invisible string theory, suggesting they were destined to meet. The dialogue highlights David's subsequent distance, as the girl asks, "Why don't you hold my hand anymore?" The tragic core is captured when the girl asserts a love that transcends death. "I loved you before I existed and I love you even when I die." David later explained that while this was a real conversation that happened, the person is no longer in his life, and he included it to solidify that message, that connections can be severed, signifying the end of something, not the beginning. The lyrical content across Withered suggests a narrative trajectory from controlling obsession to a fatal conclusion. Extreme control. In Where Did It Go Wrong?, the narrator expresses a delusion of total control, stating, "I don't mean to be conceited, but I'm the reason you're still breathing." Violent intent. Somewhere in the middle, escalates the thematic violence, featuring the chilling metaphor. "I just bought a hammer. I'm trying to fix you." While the narrator acknowledges, "I might have a screw loose." Delusion of murder. The song Ghost is widely interpreted by netizens as describing the homicide. The lyrics focus on physical cessation and denial. Why can't I hear your heartbeat?" And the possessive claim, "Hey, might have you, but I've got your ghost." The narrator seeks refuge in a make-believe fantasy to preserve a perfect memory. The final conclusion. The album ends with Afterlife, which David confirmed is the final blow. He explicitly described the track as representing that big moment of the carrying of the casket kind of thing. This consistent use of dark, highly personal narratives and voice clips across the album, culminating in themes of death and finality, establishes a strong musical pattern that netizens view as an unsettling pre-discovery confession of a tragic death. The query focuses on detailing the major alternative hypotheses circulated by netizens concerning the death of Celeste Rivas Hernandez and the involvement of David D4vd, specifically the innocent framed theory and the accident partially innocent theory. It is critical to contextualize these theories within the framework of the ongoing investigation, which, as of the time of recording, is characterized by a giant ball of assumptions. The police have not formally named David a suspect, detained, or arrested him, and the medical examiner has deferred the cause of death, classifying it only as a death investigation, rather than a formal homicide investigation. These alternative theories attempt to explain the observed data Celeste's body found in David's impounded Tesla, while adhering to the belief in David's overall innocence, or mitigating the severity of his alleged actions. The innocent and framed hypothesis posits that David had no direct, malicious role in Celeste's death. This theory is primarily driven by David's supporters online, constituting a smaller portion of netizens. This hypothesis has several layers: the deception concerning age, and the possibility of being deliberately framed by external parties or his own team. The initial layer of this theory asserts that David was completely innocent of knowingly having a relationship with a minor, because Celeste lied about her age. According to this premise, David believed he was dating an adult. A group of David's friends even came forward, claiming they thought Celeste was 19 years old, and was attending the University of Southern California USC. This interpretation suggests David was merely an unfortunate victim of circumstances, dating someone who turned out to be underage, only for her to die in his car without his involvement. In this hypothetical scenario, Celeste died not by David's hand, and he couldn't successfully proclaim his innocence because nobody would believe him. Given the sheer magnitude of the coincidences, this would be considered the mother of all coincidences. Counterarguments to age deception. Netizens widely debate the plausibility of David being genuinely deceived regarding Celeste's age. Many comments argue that Celeste literally looks like a child, or looks like a baby. They suggest that it is difficult to hide the developmental differences between a 13 or 14-year-old and a 19-year-old, especially in an intimate setting. One source notes that while Celeste might have been able to pass as older in a crowded setting like a party using multiple fake IDs, it would vary clear when someone is of a certain age. If a person spends an hour in an intimate setting, talking and looking at their face up close. Reports from neighbors and Celeste's former teacher indicated that she had a habit of running away from home multiple times, and on one occasion, the police brought her back from Hollywood. If David was renting a house in Hollywood Hills, the repeated involvement of law enforcement or the neighborhood awareness of her running away raises questions about David's claimed ignorance of her minor status. This theory acknowledges David's involvement, but refutes the charge of first-degree murder, suggesting the death was accidental or self-inflicted, and David's subsequent actions hiding the body were solely motivated by panic and the desire to safeguard his rapidly escalating career. This layer posits that David did not physically outright kill her. The most common accidental death theory suggests Celeste overdosed on drugs. David, being the height of his career and already potentially guilty of statutory misconduct due to the age difference, panics and just puts her in the trunk and leaves for his tour. The source stresses that there is no evidence that Celeste ever partook in drugs. Furthermore, if David did provide drugs to the minor, he would still be 1000% responsible, and his involvement would constitute homicide murder. Providing drugs to a victim is a tactic often employed by child predators and traffickers to keep their victims compliant. This theory is tied to the confirmation that David's impounded Tesla had a giant dent on the back. Some theorize that David, or someone on David's team, may have accidentally ran Celeste over. In this sub-theory, a team member, fearing they would be fired or go to jail, hid the body without informing David. The source questions the logic of this theory, noting that it is hard to imagine anyone involved in such an accident would not call the police, or that David would not question the dent in his car. The act of leaving a car containing a body unattended and parked on a residential street for at least 3 weeks before it was impounded also suggests extreme panic or negligence that strains credulity. Regardless of the immediate cause of death, David's actions in this scenario, hiding the body, are attributed entirely to panic regarding his rising fame. David's career had exploded, generating millions of dollars, and leading to high-profile collaborations like The Invincibles and Arcanine. The discovery of a minor's body in his car would be career-ending. David's digital footprint shows an alarming pattern of very jealous, possessive, and melodramatic behavior in his reposts and song lyrics, e.g., "I only want her next to me. I'm jealous of everything. Need a girl who doesn't interact with a single person on the face of this earth." While this behavior is often used to support the murder out of passion theory, those supporting the accidental death theory might argue this possessiveness only illustrates his intense emotional attachment, which led to an extreme, panicked reaction when Celeste died unexpectedly. The absence of a formal PR statement from David's team immediately following the discovery of the body is highly debated. While some see it as an admission of guilt heirs, because any statement could be used against him, others, leaning toward the partial innocence theory, might argue that his attorney, possibly his lawyer father, advised absolute silence to avoid making any missteps that could turn a non-murder situation into a murder conviction. Both alternative theories rely heavily on interpretation and circumstantial evidence, given that the case is fundamentally built on assumptions. The innocent, framed theory is difficult to maintain because of the visual evidence of Celeste's youth and reports of her history as a runaway. The accident, partially innocent theory attempts to mitigate David's guilt by making him responsible only for hiding the body due to panic, but it struggles with the legal reality that providing drugs to a minor resulting in death constitutes a severe crime, and the physical evidence, the car dent, is speculative. Ultimately, the source notes that the vast majority of netizens currently believe David murdered Celeste, the jealousy, possessiveness theory, or theory 4 in the sources list. However, David is legally presumed innocent, and the official investigation continues, with authorities confirming only that they are exploring all potential avenues. The case surrounding the deceased 14-year-old Celeste Rivas-Hernandez and the popular musician David D4vd is defined by its overwhelming ambiguity, having been described as giant ball of assumptions, rather than a straightforward criminal investigation. While the online sphere debates various possibilities ranging from David's complete innocence to premeditated murder motivated by possessiveness, the reality of the legal situation presents a somber fact. The public figure at the center of the tragedy is the unequivocal focus of law enforcement. Despite the legal principle that David is afforded the presumption of innocence until proven guilty in a court of law, and the fact that he has not been named a suspect, detained, or arrested as of the time of the source recording, his position remains perilous. One law enforcement expert interviewed publicly dispelled the notion that David's uncharged status means he is not the focus of the investigation. This expert stated that they could affirm with 1000% confidence he is suspect number one. This designation highlights a critical tension, although police are exploring all potential avenues. The circumstantial evidence, including the discovery of Celeste's body in his impounded Tesla, and his subsequent decision to continue his tour and communicate solely through his attorney, has cemented him as the primary person of interest. David's spokesperson's initial statement, confirming he had been informed and was cooperating, did not stop the flow of questions, and his subsequent decision to make no further statements is considered weird by some netizens who expected a clear proclamation of innocence. Amidst the swirling theories, which often romanticize the alleged relationship through analyses of David's highly emotional and jealous digital footprint, a painful consensus emerges from outside his fan base. This case is not a complex, twisted love story, but an example of exploitation. Many netizens emphasize the need to avoid romanticizing the events by framing David as merely obsessed or heartbroken. The core tragedy rests on the victim's age. Celeste was likely 14 years old when she died, not 15, as sometimes inaccurately reported by mainstream media. This slight shift in age is crucial, as observers point out that media describing her as a young woman subtly attempts to make alleged predators sound better by making the victim sound older. A particularly insightful netizen comment rejected the romantic narrative entirely, concluding that Celeste was a child who was just starting to grow up and he was a predator with a secret. This perspective suggests that the complexity lies not in David's supposed emotional depth, but in the insidious nature of grooming, a predator who, like children, would not tolerate that child beginning to develop her own thoughts and independence. The official investigation remains shrouded in silence. The Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD, and the medical examiner's office have been notoriously quiet. The cause of death has been deferred, meaning investigators have yet to definitively categorize the death, classifying it only as a death investigation, rather than formally a homicide probe. Authorities have even noted that it could take weeks or months to even determine if a crime had been committed, or for an arrest to be made. This lack of resolution prolongs the period of intense speculation, fueled by countless screenshots, texts, and song lyrics that paint a picture of possessiveness and control. For the public, the case highlights a series of failures, leading many to feel that multiple failures allowed Celeste's tragic death to occur before her body was even discovered. The painful truth remains that while David continues his life, his legal future is uncertain, and the full story of Celeste Rivas-Hernandez's death has yet to be formally disclosed by the authorities. A world that taught young people to mistake obsession for love, fame for safety, control for care. Celeste was 14, still trying to figure out who she was, while the internet kept telling her who to be. He was older, powerful, adored, and no one stopped to ask what it meant when a grown man's words began to sound like possession disguised as poetry. This is what grooming looks like in the digital age. It doesn't always begin with threats. It begins with admiration, messages that feel special, promises that sound like protection. Step by step, the line blurs until the victim can't tell where affection ends and fear begins. And by the time they realize, they've already been rewritten into someone else's story. What happened to Celeste forces us to ask, how many others are still out there, waiting to be noticed, waiting to be saved? How many young people are scrolling through screens, believing that love should hurt, that jealousy means care, that silence means devotion? The internet gave them voices, but it also gave predators new ways to find them. Protecting them means more than hashtags and condolences. It means schools teaching what real boundaries look like. It means parents are learning that privacy isn't the same as distance. It means platforms being held accountable for the adults who hide behind usernames. It means fans learning to question the people they worship before tragedy turns them into martyrs. And maybe the hardest question of all, who carries the blame when the system fails a child? The man who groomed her, the parents who didn't see, the industry that protects its stars, or all of us, who kept watching the story unfold and called it entertainment. Because in the end, Celeste wasn't just a headline. She was a mirror, showing us how fragile our young are, how easy it is to lose them, and how late we often realize that the danger was never hidden. It was right in front of us, wrapped in a love song.